was told the word was Vodun, not the flattened voodoo from movies. In Ouidah, the night air thickened like warm syrup, and the palms whispered in a tongue the guide swore he didn't know. "You can watch," he said, "but you must not ask the names of the masks." I didn't plan to do more than that. Watch, keep a respectful distance, and bring back a few photographs to prove I'd gone farther than any sensible itinerary advised. The courtyard was a square of packed earth framed by low walls. Someone had drawn chalk sigils, interlocking lines, spirals, a ladder that stopped in the dust just short of the stars. A clay lamp hissed on shea oil, painting everyone's faces amber and black. Drums began, and with them a wind that wasn't a wind, a stirring that came from within the ribs. Women in white moved like tides around a central figure, a masked dancer sewn in raffia and bright cloth, taller than any person there, eyes lost in a cataract of beads. I stood with the guide, Pascal, while a priestess marked our brows with cool water. "You wanderers carry too much sky in you," she murmured. "No wall to hold the breath." My French is passable, but the last word she used didn't quite mean breath and didn't quite mean soul. She tied a length of red thread around my wrist. Loose, ceremonial, ridiculous. I kept it because it felt rude to pull it off. Their singing was not sweet. It grated like a rope over stone. Yet beneath the roughness was a law, a pattern that forced the body to sway, even if the mind clung to stillness. A boy of 7 sat beside an old man with cataract eyes. The child's head nodded in the rhythm. The elder's fingers kept time. When the masked dancer leaned over them both, the drums cut, the courtyard inhaled, and for a heartbeat, I swore their postures traded, small shoulders suddenly heavy with years, wrinkled hands fluttering with a child's restless flicker. It might have been shadow play, but the old man laughed in a voice that belonged in a schoolyard, and the boy's gaze went far away, as if reading the horizon for weather. There was a sacrifice, simple and solemn. The animal was treated like a guest until the moment of offering. I looked away, and when I looked back, the earth had drunk the life that was given. No gore, no spectacle, only the way the ground darkened, as though the night itself had leaned down to sip. The priestess said, "A debt must wear a body before it can be paid." She pressed a small calabash to my sternum, not hard, but with the insistence of a mother checking a fever. Empty, she decided, and for the first time I felt offended and oddly relieved. I slept in a concrete room with a fan that ticked like a distant metronome. At sunrise, the chalk sigils had smeared into ordinary dust, the masks were packed away, and the courtyard looked harmless as a schoolyard. Pascal wouldn't talk about it in daylight. "Night names are not for noon," he said, leaving me to the heat and the smell of wood smoke and limes. Back home, the sensation of borrowed wind didn't leave. I'd brought nothing physical, or so I believed. My bags were searched by customs, my cameras clean of any forbidden images. Yet the red thread reappeared around my wrist on the second morning, although I'd stripped it off somewhere over the Sahara and watched it fall like a dead vein into the airplane's trash bag. I told myself I must have tied a second one and promptly failed to remember when. Then the small things began. My bathroom mirror fogged from within when the room was cold. I'd speak and hear a faint echo that didn't match my words, as if someone were rehearsing lines in a rehearsed version of my voice. An email sent at 3:14 a.m. appeared in my sent folder with a subject line I never wrote. Borrowed breath. It was blank, addressed to no one. From me. The neighbor's toddler, Miko, stopped me on the stairs and patted my wrist exactly where the red thread lay. "Don't lose it," he said, serious as a judge. "He needs a door." His mother laughed that brittle laugh you learn for children's oddities, then took him away with a look that mislaid its smile halfway down the hall. I dreamed drums, not sound but pressure, thudding low behind the heart. In the dream, I stood in the same courtyard, but the chalk ladder climbed up my spine, rung by rung, until the topmost step pressed behind my teeth. Each time I woke, the room smelled faintly of shea oil and rain that hadn't fallen. On the fourth night, I found a calabash in my backpack, small enough to fit a child's palm. I hadn't bought it. The seam of its gored skin was stitched with red fiber. When I shook it, something light moved inside with a papery hush, like moth wings. I set it on my desk and swore I would take it to a museum in the morning, let a specialist roll their eyes and demystify me. As I turned away, something tapped the calabash from within, once, then twice, not moth wings soft. Knuckles on wood, polite and patient. The tapping continued until sunrise. By then, I had moved the calabash into a kitchen drawer and wedged it between utensils, as if silverware could drown the sound. It didn't. Every so often, one spoon would tremble, lightly chiming against another. I told myself it was just the vibration of the refrigerator. That morning, I called Pascal. The connection crackled with a lag that made every word sound like an echo in a deep cave. "You still have something of theirs," he said, when I mentioned the red thread. "I took nothing," I argued. "Only a few photos." "You watched," he replied. "Sometimes that's enough." He hung up before I could ask what he meant. I scrolled through my camera, heart beating faster with each thumbnail. Half of the pictures from that night were gone, nothing but black frames. The others showed fragments, feet in white dust, a hand raised mid-song, the clay lamp's flame stretching upward like it was reaching for something invisible. And one photo that made my skin crawl, my own shadow cast on the courtyard wall, but beside me, another shape, taller, thinner, head bowed as if listening. I deleted the file, but when I checked again, it was back. The shadow's head was lifted now. That day, the mirror fogged again while I brushed my teeth. This time, words appeared in the condensation. "He breathes with you." I ran my sleeve across the glass, but the letters didn't smear. They sank deeper, as though carved beneath the surface. That night, I left the apartment lights on. The city noise usually comforted me, but the distant sirens and rumbling cars sounded too much like the layered chant from Ouidah. My neighbors had gone quiet. Only Miko's laughter broke the hush now and then, though I could have sworn I heard him whispering to someone. When I finally slept, the dream picked up where the previous one ended. I was back in the courtyard. The same priestess stood over me, holding the calabash. The masks circled her, faces shifting between human and animal. "You left the gate open," she said. "Now he follows the wind that came through it." "Who?" I asked, but the question tasted strange, like someone else's word. "The one without a body." I woke to a crash from the kitchen. The drawer where I'd hidden the calabash was on the floor, its contents scattered. The gourd sat upright, amid forks and knives, red thread uncoiled beside it. It was moving slightly, like something inside was breathing. I backed away. My pulse felt too heavy, my chest too tight. Then I heard a voice, soft, rasping, and not quite outside my head. A debt must wear a body. The same phrase the priestess had said. I stumbled toward the front door, but my legs gave out halfway. The floorboards beneath me thumped in rhythm, slow, deliberate beats. Drums. I pressed my ear to the ground and the sound deepened, rising through my bones until it felt like my own heartbeat had been replaced. When I looked up, the red thread had crawled across the floor toward me, winding itself around my ankle like a living thing. I tore it off, flinging it aside, but the fibers left faint red impressions on my skin, as though they'd burned their way in. The tapping from the calabash stopped. Silence. Then a breath exhaled from nowhere, a warm, humid gust that smelled of clay and blood. From the kitchen doorway, a shadow leaned forward. My own body mirrored the movement exactly, but the shadow hesitated when I froze. And then, in perfect sync, it smiled. The next morning, I found muddy footprints leading from the kitchen to my bedroom, bare, adult-sized, with traces of white chalk at the edges. I didn't own chalk. That night, I dreamt again, but it wasn't a dream. I was sure I was awake. The air in my room vibrated with drums, too faint to hear, but strong enough to feel in my chest. My reflection stood in the mirror, delayed by a heartbeat, blinking after I did, breathing slower. "Give him back," it said, lips moving just out of time. "You borrowed the wrong breath." My throat tightened. "What do you mean?" But the reflection only raised a hand, palm out, and the same red thread gleamed between its fingers. It placed the thread over its heart, and my own chest burned in the exact same spot. When I woke, there was ash on my pillow and a whisper fading in the air. "He still needs a door." The next morning, my apartment smelled faintly of wet earth and iron. When I opened the window, the city looked washed out, colorless, as though dawn had forgotten to bring light. I tried to convince myself I'd been sleepwalking, that all of it, the footprints, the voice, the mirror, was exhaustion playing tricks. But the ash on the pillow was real. So was the red mark still seared into my chest, right where my reflection had touched its heart. I called Pascal again. He didn't answer. The line went dead after one ring, followed by a hiss of static that sounded too rhythmic to be random. I recorded it on my phone and played it back, slowing it down. Beneath the distortion, there was chanting, faint but unmistakable. I didn't know the words, but the pattern, the rise and fall of it, matched the rhythm from the ritual. By midday, I decided to throw the calabash away. I wrapped it in plastic, sealed it with tape, and took it 3 blocks down to the river that cut through the city. The sky hung low, gray and swollen. When I tossed the gourd into the current, it didn't float. It sank immediately, without a ripple. Relief flooded through me, brief and thin. That night, I dreamed again. I stood by the same river, but it was no longer city water. It ran red, thick as rust. The priestess stood on the opposite bank, face hidden behind her mask of cowrie shells. "You can't drown what breathes in you," she said. "He walks your dreams because your shadow called him home." I tried to shout, but the air filled my mouth like syrup. She raised her arm, and from the surface of the river rose the calabash, dripping. Something pale pressed against its inner wall, like fingertips seeking purchase. When I woke, I was standing at the river's edge again, barefoot in my sleep clothes, mud caked between my toes. In my right hand, the same calabash, dry and unbroken. The police officer who found me didn't ask many questions. He assumed I'd been drinking. Maybe I should have told him the truth, but what would that sound like? Officer, my soul might be sharing a body with someone I met at a voodoo ritual. I went home in silence. By the time I reached my building, the sky had turned a bruised purple. Miko's mother was standing by the door. She smiled in that tight, polite way neighbors do when they want to be kind but not curious. "He's been talking about you," she said. "Says your friend is nice." "My friend?" I asked. "The tall one with the beads." I didn't have to look around to know no one was behind me, but when I did, the air shimmered faintly, as though heat were rising from asphalt. Inside, I tried not to look at the mirror. I failed. My reflection's eyes moved before mine did this time. Then it smiled again, wider, almost affectionate. "You're keeping him alive," it said, or maybe I thought it said. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, overlapping with my own breathing. I backed into the kitchen. The calabash sat on the counter, exactly where I'd left it before, throwing it away. The red thread had woven itself around its rim again, tighter this time. I wanted to run. Instead, I did something worse. I picked it up. It was warm, not like an object left in sunlight, but like skin. When I brought it close to my ear, I heard something that froze every muscle in my body, my own voice whispering. Not words, just the rise and fall of breath, the same rhythm I used to calm myself as a child. That night, Miko knocked on my door. His mother's voice called from down the hall, but he ignored her. He looked up at me and said, "He says thank you." "For what?" I asked, my throat dry. "For lending your breath." Before I could reply, his mother came running, apologizing, pulling him away. But as she turned, I saw a red thread looped loosely around his tiny wrist, the same as mine once had been. The air grew heavy again. Drums, faint. Underneath everything, the rhythm of a heartbeat, not my own. I locked every door and window, turned off the lights, and sat in the middle of the floor with the calabash in front of me. "I didn't ask for this," I whispered. The gourd pulsed once, softly, like something inside its side. Then, from the dark, a voice that wasn't mine said, "A debt must wear a body." The room went still. And then, from the hallway, came the sound of bare feet, slow, dragging, deliberate. They stopped outside my door. Knock, knock, knock. The knocking went on for minutes, slow, spaced apart like each strike cost effort. When I finally stood, the air in my apartment felt thick, like standing underwater. The calabash on the floor throbbed once, in rhythm with the knocks. "Who's there?" I asked. My voice didn't sound like mine. Silence. Then, very softly, "You." Every instinct told me not to open the door, but curiosity, stupid human curiosity, overpowered fear. I turned the knob. The hallway was empty. No Miko, no neighbor, no echo of retreating footsteps. Only the faint smell of clay and something faintly sweet, shea oil, just like the ritual night. As I closed the door, something scraped on the floor behind me. The calabash had moved. It sat closer to the door than where I'd left it, red thread trailing behind like a thin vein. That night, sleep wasn't possible. I sat on the couch, every light on, and watched the calabash. Hours passed. Around 3 a.m. the power flickered, and in that one heartbeat of darkness I saw, no, felt a tall shape standing over it. When the light returned, the shape was gone, but the thread was now wrapped around one leg of the table, winding upward on its own. The whispering started next. Not words, not even language, just breath moving through space. I traced it to the mirror again. My reflection didn't match my movements anymore. It was closer this time, face near the glass, eyes black like wet soil. "You keep running," it said, "but he's already wearing your name." Then the mirror cracked. Not a full shatter, just a thin, branching line that crossed the reflection's throat. I stumbled back. The calabash rattled violently, lid trembling, and then something escaped. The air turned cold enough to burn. The lights dimmed, and from inside the calabash came a low, guttural sound, half sigh, half growl. A smoky shadow began to leak out, curling upward like ink in water. It wasn't just darkness. It moved with intent. I ran for the door, but before I reached it, the hallway lights outside flickered too. My neighbors' doors were open, every single one. Inside each apartment, lights glowed dimly, and for a moment, I saw figures standing perfectly still, facing inward toward nothing. The drums returned, faint at first, then louder. My heart matched them, beat for beat. I ran down the stairs and out into the street. The city was silent. No cars, no wind. Even the neon signs across the street were dark. When I looked up, the sky above wasn't the color of night. It was the same dusty red as the ritual courtyard. At the far end of the street stood the priestess. She wore the same mask, but this time her hands were covered in ash. "You shouldn't have come back alone," she said. "I didn't ask for this," I shouted. She tilted her head. "You watched what was forbidden. The mask saw you. The body needed a door." "What body?" She stepped closer. I could see the reflection of her cowrie shells gleam with each word. "The one without a soul, the one you carry now." Before I could respond, something behind me exhaled, hot, wet, almost human. I turned, but no one was there. Only a faint outline in the mist, standing where my shadow should have been. The priestess raised her hand. "He will finish the breath he borrowed." The drums surged. My knees buckled. The air folded in on itself, and I fell. When I opened my eyes, I was lying in my apartment again. Morning light streamed through the curtains. The calabash was gone. For a moment, everything looked normal. Birds chirped outside. A car honked. I laughed, shaky but real. Maybe I'd lost my mind. Maybe it was just a nightmare stretched too far. Then my phone buzzed. A new message. From Pascal time, 4:44 a.m. Text, "He's not done." The sacrifice wasn't finished. Attached was a photo. Grainy, dark, but unmistakable. It showed the courtyard in Ouidah, the masked figure standing over someone lying in the dirt. The person's face was turned away, but the wrist, pale, with a red thread tied around it, was mine. The caption beneath it read, "You left before the breath returned." And from the next room, a voice that sounded almost like mine said, "Then let's finish it." I didn't move for a full minute after hearing that voice. It wasn't echo or illusion. It had weight, like someone speaking through my lungs. Slowly, I turned toward the sound. The hallway beyond my bedroom door was darker than it should have been. Something stood just inside that darkness, tall, motionless, the air around it trembling like heat above asphalt. I couldn't make out a face, but I recognized the shape, the same figure from the photographs, my own outline. "Who are you?" I managed to whisper. The thing tilted its head, mirroring mine exactly. Then Almost kindly it said, "You." The lights flickered again. The shape stepped backward into the wall, vanishing as if it had dissolved into my shadow. For a long moment, the apartment felt empty again. Too empty. I could hear my heart beating, the same rhythm as the ritual drums, steady and patient. I wanted to call someone, anyone, but who would believe this? I stared at the phone screen, Pascal's message still glowing. The sacrifice wasn't finished. I dialed him anyway. The line clicked, and a woman answered. Her voice was calm, tired. "Pascal's phone," she said. "Who is this?" I hesitated. "A friend. I need to speak with him. It's urgent." There was silence. Then, "I'm sorry. Pascal died 3 nights ago. He drowned." I nearly dropped the phone. "That's impossible," I said. "He sent me a message this morning." The woman sighed. Then it wasn't him. The call ended. Something inside me snapped. The fragile border between disbelief and terror gave way. I tore through the apartment, searching for any trace of the calabash, the red thread, anything tangible I could destroy. Nothing. It was as if those things had never existed. But the mirror still bore its thin crack, and when I looked into it, my reflection didn't blink. "Stop running," it whispered. "He's almost here." I stumbled back and ran outside. The city looked wrong again. Streets slightly narrower, buildings tilted as if they were bowing inward. People moved, but none met my eyes. I kept walking until I reached the old museum near the river, the only place that felt solid enough to hold a secret. Inside, dust floated in long shafts of light. A security guard slept in a chair by the door. I slipped past him and wandered into the African exhibits, rows of masks, carved figures, ceremonial drums. The moment I stepped between them, the air changed. The drums, wooden and silent, began to hum faintly, low and resonant. My eyes were drawn to one display case in particular, a mask of woven raffia and cowrie shells, almost identical to the one the priestess wore. Beneath it was a plaque, "Ritual Mask of the Breath Giver," used in ceremonies of transference and atonement. The accompanying text described a legend, how, in ancient rites, a soul could be borrowed to preserve life, but only for a time. When the debt came due, the lender had to return the breath willingly, or both spirits would fade. I stepped closer. My reflection in the glass wavered, then blinked without me. Behind me, a whisper, "He's waiting." I turned. Miko stood there, barefoot, his small hand wrapped around a piece of red thread, his mother nowhere in sight. "How did you get here?" I asked. He shrugged. He showed me. "Who?" Miko pointed behind me. In the glass reflection of the mask, I saw it again, the tall figure, its face featureless except for a faint line where the mouth should be. It raised one finger and touched the glass. A crack spread across the case, thin and branching, the same as the one on my mirror. "Miko, go home," I shouted, but the boy only tilted his head. "He says it's your turn now." The mask inside the case began to pulse, the shells glinting like eyes. The hum of the drums deepened until the floor vibrated beneath my feet. Something inside my chest answered that vibration. My lungs burned. Every breath felt stolen, borrowed, not mine. The museum lights exploded one by one, glass raining down. In the flicker of emergency lighting, I saw movement, shadows spilling like ink from the walls, gathering behind me, forming that same tall outline. The figure leaned close, whispering into my ear with a voice that was both Pascal's and mine. Return what you took. I couldn't speak. My throat locked. You opened the door. It continued. Now walk through. It placed a hand, cold, dry, impossibly light, against my chest, and then it pushed. The world went white. When I could see again, I was standing in the courtyard in Ouidah. The air was heavy with smoke. The priestess stood before me, the masked dancers circling once more. You brought him home, she said, but he is not satisfied. I looked down. My hands were no longer my own. They were dark, scarred, older. Around my wrist hung the red thread, and lying on the ground before me was a body, pale, still, eyes open, my face. The drums began again. For a few seconds I couldn't move. The drums swelled, the night pulsed, and the body at my feet, the body with my face, stared upward through a glaze of dust. I tried to speak, to shout, but the voice that came from my throat wasn't mine. It was deeper, slower, soaked in an accent I'd only ever heard in that courtyard. The priestess approached. Her cowrie mask shimmered like wet bone in the firelight. You feel the wrong skin, she said. That is the price of seeing. I stumbled back, every nerve alive with panic. The dancers encircled me, their feet pounding the dirt in perfect rhythm with my heart. I realized the rhythm wasn't following my heart. My heart was following it. What did you do to me? I screamed. The priestess tilted her head. We only opened what you carried. He borrowed your breath. Now you wear his bones. I looked down again. My hands, still not mine, trembled. My fingernails were cracked and gray. Dust fell from the joints as if the skin were old parchment. I was inside someone else's body, and the thing that had once been me lay still on the ground. He's not dead, the priestess said softly, just waiting for you to finish what you began. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. The dancers moved faster, circling tighter, the drums merging into a single, endless note that filled my skull. My vision blurred. The stars above seemed to bend, leaning closer as though they were watching. Then the priestess pressed her palm to my chest. I felt a pull, gentle at first, then violent, as if the air inside me were being vacuumed out. My breath tore free in a visible stream, a white mist rising from my lips and coiling toward the figure on the ground. The body, my body, gasped. The chest rose, the eyes blinked. It began to breathe again. For 1 second, relief washed through me. Then I realized what was happening. The breath didn't stop leaving me. It poured out faster, dragging heat, memory, thought. My vision flickered. The world dimmed. I fell to my knees. Please, I whispered, stop. The priestess shook her head. You must balance the debt. He cannot live while you keep what is his. But he's me, I choked. Not anymore. The mist between us thickened, tethering the two bodies together like an umbilical cord of light. The other me, the one with my real face, rose slowly, looking down at me with hollow eyes. He smiled. You see, he said, you gave it freely. He knelt, pressing a hand to my shoulder. Rest. I'll take care of everything now. I wanted to fight, but my limbs were heavy, my body unraveling from the inside out. The courtyard, the masks, the priestess, all began to fade. Then suddenly a hand caught my wrist, small, warm, real. Miko. He was there, standing between me and the other me, his wide eyes reflecting the fire. Don't, he said. You can still choose. The priestess stepped back, surprised. He has no part in this. Miko shook his head. He has mine. You said a debt needs a body. Before anyone could stop him, Miko pressed his palm against my chest. The red thread from his wrist unraveled, snaking into the air like a living line, wrapping around the glowing mist. The connection between my body and the stolen breath snapped like a wire under tension. The light imploded. I screamed, soundless, endless. When I opened my eyes again, I was back in my apartment. Morning light slanted across the floor. The calabash sat quietly on the table, lid sealed, thread gone. The mirror was uncracked. My chest no longer burned. For the first time in weeks, silence. I stumbled to the sink and splashed water on my face. My reflection blinked when I did. Relief hit so hard, it hurt. Then I noticed the corner of the mirror, a faint handprint, small, child-sized, Miko's. And when I turned toward the hallway, I heard the softest whisper, "He still needs a door." The air grew heavy again. My reflection flickered. In its eyes, I saw not me, but the courtyard, the priestess, and a small figure standing in my place. Miko. I pressed my hand to the mirror. It was cold. The drums were faint, but there, beating, waiting, and then, very softly, from somewhere inside the walls, knock, knock, knock. The knocks didn't stop. Each one landed deeper, echoing through the apartment's bones. I stood frozen before the mirror, watching my reflection twitch between faces, mine, then Miko's, then something ancient, wearing a child's outline. "Please," I whispered, "what do you want from me?" The reflection's mouth didn't move, but a voice filled the air, soft, overlapping, as if two people spoke through the same breath. "Doors open both ways." The mirror rippled like water. For a moment, I saw the courtyard again, faint behind the glass, the priestess standing in the circle of firelight, the mask beside her, waiting. The air inside my apartment thinned, heavy with the same heat I'd felt that night in Ouidah. I stepped back, shaking my head. No, not again. But the glass bulged outward, like something pressing from the other side. A small handprint appeared, clearer this time, then another, then a face. Miko. His eyes were wide, pleading. His lips moved, but the sound came from behind me. "Help me." I turned, but the room was empty, only the faint rustle of the red thread brushing across the floor. It slid toward the mirror like it was being pulled from underneath the walls. I should have run. Instead, I followed it. The thread trembled, stretched tight, and vanished into the mirror's edge. I reached out, fingertips grazing the cold surface. The moment I touched it, the world shifted. The reflection grabbed my hand. I felt a jolt, electric, alive, burning. I was yanked forward and fell through the glass into darkness. When the world steadied, I stood in a hallway that wasn't mine. It looked like my apartment, but older, paint peeled, walls damp, air filled with incense and rot. At the end of the hall stood Miko, facing away. "Miko," I called. He turned slowly. His eyes were entirely white. The red thread hung from his wrist, long and frayed. "He's behind you," he said. I spun around. The tall figure from my nightmares was there, the mask of cowrie shells glimmering faintly in the dark. His breath was a sound, a long, drawn sigh that shook the air. "You owe him passage," Miko said, his voice distant, almost detached. "He can't leave until you finish the path." "What path?" The priestess's voice came from everywhere. "The breath must return. The living must guide the lost." The floor cracked beneath my feet. Through the splintered boards, I saw the courtyard far below, its fires still burning, its drums still beating. The dancers moved in endless circles, and in the center lay the calabash, open and waiting. The tall figure stepped closer. I could see now what I hadn't before. Beneath the mask wasn't a face, but a storm of light and shadow, constantly shifting. He reached out. I expected cold, but his touch was warm, human. "One breath," he said in my voice. "That's all I need." He pressed his palm to my chest. In the air, left my lungs again, ripped out so violently I fell to my knees. My vision tunneled, and through the ringing in my ears I heard the drums fading into a single heartbeat. When I looked up, Miko stood beside him, clutching the red thread with both hands. Tears streaked his face. "You're hurting him," he whispered. The priestess appeared behind them, her mask now cracked down the center. "The boy opened the wrong door," she said. "Now, neither of you belongs where you stand." She lifted her hand, and the world began to shake. The walls folded inward, the hallway melting into the courtyard once more. Fire circled us, heat pressing down like judgment. I tried to breathe, but nothing came. The air was gone, stolen. Then Miko moved. He tied the red thread between my wrist and the masked figure's hand. "Share it," he said. The drums stopped. The silence was unbearable. Then, slowly, I felt it, breath returning. My lungs expanded, the air splitting between us, half for me, half for him. The priestess lowered her head. Balance restored. The fire dimmed. The dancers stopped. For the first time since the ritual, I felt still. Not free, but whole. The figure turned to me. His mask tilted in something like a nod. "We are the same now," he said. "One door, 2 breaths." The courtyard faded. When I opened my eyes again, I was kneeling in my apartment. Morning light streamed in through cracked blinds. The mirror was whole. The calabash was gone. On my wrist, a single red thread remained, thin, faintly pulsing, as if alive. I thought it was over. Then the reflection in the mirror blinked once, slowly, and smiled. Its eyes were not mine. The smile in the mirror was slow, deliberate, and wrong. It wasn't the startled expression of a man seeing himself. It was recognition. "Welcome back." I froze. My hand twitched, and the reflection didn't mimic it. Instead, it reached towards the glass, palm flattening against the surface from the inside. The faint pulse in the red thread on my wrist quickened. Each beat pulled a breath from my chest I didn't mean to give. "You see now," the reflection said, the words muffled as though coming through water. "He's still inside. You share the door." I stumbled backward, clutching the thread, but it tightened like it had grown roots into my veins. The walls seemed to lean inward again, and that thick, humid heat from Ouidah filled the air. My apartment smelled of clay and oil and smoke. From somewhere near the ceiling came a dry whisper. "One door, 2 breaths. One must close." The reflection lowered its hand. "You borrowed his life," it said, "but he's tasted yours. He won't give it back easily." Then the lights in the room dimmed until only the faint daylight from the window remained. The air felt heavier, colder. A shadow passed across the wall, tall, thin, and patient. The mask, its cowrie shells gleamed faintly in the mirror's light. Beneath it, I saw glimpses of my own face flicker in and out, like a candle seen through fog. "You can't stay," I whispered. "You don't belong here." The reflection tilted its head. "Neither do you." The glass rippled. I saw 2 worlds overlapping, the apartment and the courtyard. The priestess stood in the background of that other place. her mask gone now, her bare face ancient and calm. She was watching me. "You've learned the rhythm," she said, voice low and even. "The soul moves like the drum. To stop it is to break both skins. I just want it to end," I said. "Please." She nodded slowly, then returned the last breath. I didn't understand until I saw Miko standing beside her. He looked peaceful, small, his hands clasped before him. The red thread that bound my wrist glowed faintly, one end vanishing into the reflection. He smiled, softly like a child forgiving something far beyond his years. "Let go," he said. For a moment, everything was still. Then I exhaled. Long, hard, the red thread unraveled, drifting upward like smoke. It curled toward the mirror, seeping through the glass. The reflection reached out, took it, and pulled it fully inside. The sound of drums came one last time, faint, distant, like a heartbeat fading into sleep. The reflection mouthed something I couldn't hear. The priestess raised her hand. And then, like the first breath after drowning, silence filled the room. The glass went dark. I collapsed. When I woke, it was night. The air was cool. My wrist was bare. The apartment was quiet. I stood, dizzy but lighter. The mirror reflected only me, hollow-eyed, exhausted, alive. I walked to it, half expecting the glass to move again. It didn't. For days afterward, everything stayed still. The whispers stopped. The smell of shea oil faded. I convinced myself it was over, until a week later, I was standing in line at a cafe, the noise of the crowd comforting. Then, from behind me, a man's voice, familiar, steady, said, "You dropped this." I turned. He was tall, thin, smiling faintly. His eyes were dark and patient. In his hand, a red thread. "Yours, I think," he said. And before I could answer, he was gone. I looked down at the thread in my palm. It was pulsing, slowly. That night, when I came home, the mirror in the hallway was fogged again. 3 words traced themselves in the mist. "He still breathes." The drums began in the distance, quiet, rhythmic, certain. Somewhere far away, the priestess whispered, "Doors never stay closed forever." And then, beneath the hum of the city, I heard the smallest sound. Knock, knock, knock.